Hi, I'm Tom Biebighauser, owner of Wetland Restoration and Training. I believe that wetlands are amazing places. They're so valuable to our environment. Wetlands are important because they will clean runoff. Wetlands will control flooding in communities. But the most important thing is that they provide critical habitat to fish and wildlife. And they're just beautiful places to visit. In today's video, we're going to be looking at finding a suitable location for building a wetland. We're going to find a site where we can build a large wetland at a low cost, or even a small wetland at a low cost. And what they say about real estate is location, location, location. So if we find a location for building a wetland, you're going to be really pleased with the results, and that wetland's going to look natural. So let's start in and let's look for places to build a wetland. Let's look at where wetlands occur on a natural landscape. Wetlands are shallow basins that are found on sloped ground. And these shallow basins generally have clay, and the clay is compacted, so the water is very slow to soak into the ground. Wetlands can be most any size. I've seen natural wetlands as small as 10 foot in diameter, and I've seen them well over 1,000 acres. But this wetland here is only about 1.5 feet deep. The soil in the bottom is compacted clay, so when it rains, the water just has trouble soaking into the ground. A way to look at natural wetlands is that they are stair-stepped on a slope. And this mountainside, the rice paddies, which are wetlands, are stair-stepped down the slope, and each one is a basin that occurs in a bench. Now, what we're looking at here applies to any type of wetland. Whether you're looking at a forested wetland, or you're looking at emergent wetland, or any other type, they're all in these shallow basins on sloped ground. The best way to find a place to build a wetland is to go outside and walk on higher ground and look downhill. We're best able to identify slopes in shallow basins that could indicate drained wetlands by being on higher ground and looking for these level spots below us. This area behind me is very well suited for building a wetland. There's a lot of room. We're quite a ways away from fences. We're not near any buried utilities in the ground. We don't have any overhead wires to be worried about. There are no houses nearby that we have to worry about flooding. There's no roads, public roads that could be impacted. It's a great place to look at. It looks like the slope is definitely less than 2%, and it looks like we could lay out a wetland there that would have a change in elevation of 2 feet or less from upper to lower edge. Here's a good place to build a wetland. That puddle formed the same day the snow melted. The area was leveled to serve as a landing for a timber sale. Here's another good place to restore a wetland. Someone has been driving across the ditch, and look at the ruts they've left behind. And those ruts are full of water. This looks like a good place to build a wetland. It's a mowed field that changes less than 2 feet in elevation from upper to lower edge. But if you look closely, you'll see there's a stake marking the location of a buried gas pipeline. I don't recommend building a wetland here because this one might be your last. This looks like a good place to build a wetland. It's in a subdivision, and you can see the perimeter of the wetland that we marked using plastic flagging that's been tied to trees and shrubs. Unfortunately, we had to find another location to build the wetland when it was discovered that there's a 14,000 volt electric cable buried underneath this site. This looks like another good place to build a wetland. It's a large open field that's being mowed. The ditch shows us the area used to be wetland. However, I don't recommend building a wetland here because there's a water pipe that's buried in the ground, and a large portion of the field is within an easement for the road. And then there's also the concern that if we build a wetland here, we might end up flooding the road or making the embankment for the road too soft for travel. This is a great place to build a wetland. It's within a restored prairie on the Illinois River National Wildlife Refuge. The two people you see are standing in the center of an excellent place to build a wetland. They're in an area where trees were cut for a timber sale in California. And if you look close, you can see the shallow basin and then the pink flagging that marks the perimeter of the wetland that could be built on this site. This looks like a really good place to build a wetland, and it is. However, it's already a wetland. It's a wet meadow wetland. I don't recommend choosing a place like this to build a wetland. If you pick a place to build a wetland that's already a wetland, more than likely you'll need to apply for permits from state and federal agencies, and it can take a long time to get these permits, and you may have to have a complete design prepared by an engineer. So while most people think, and rightly so, it's a good thing to restore a wetland area, if the area you're planning to work on already has wetland plants and wetland soil, it's going to take a long time to get the approval to do the project. I recommend avoiding areas that have many large trees. This is because it takes time and can cost a lot of money to remove these trees. And the roots have to be removed in order to build the wetland on the site. Don't build your first wetland in a ditch. This can get complicated. We'll talk later about filling and disabling ditches, but for your first wetland, please stay away with ditches and stay away from blocking any type of a stream. Now, it's often necessary to crash through the brush and even crawl on your hands and knees to find a good place for building a wetland. Not every place you pick is going to be a mowed field. Many of these areas have been growing up for 20 or 30 years since they were last farmed. We're on a hillside where it's way too steep to build a wetland. My arms are stretched out showing you the slope. It's at least 30 to 40%. It's possible to build a wetland here, but the wetland's going to be tiny, and it's going to look artificial and cost a lot of money to build. What's helping us to determine slope is the fact that this field is mowed. If the field's mowed, you can see slope so much better. But if the field is not mowed, you're going to have to do much more measuring because the tall vegetation hides the steepness of the ground. The hillside behind me is too steep for building a wetland. You can take a look at the fence and see the angle coming down the hill, and you can transfer that angle behind, and you can see that the slope here is probably about 30%. Is it possible to build a wetland on that steep of ground? Yes, it is. However, it's going to be a very small wetland, and it's going to look artificial and be very expensive to build. It's better to find flatter ground. I'm looking for a place to build another wetland on our farm in eastern Kentucky. It's not possible to have too many wetlands on a farm, and this looks great to me. It's a level area of ground. Look at how flat it is. I mean, it's flat enough where you could park your vehicle and not have to set the emergency brake. It's flat enough where you could set up a tent and you're not going to roll over in your sleep. And also it's flat enough where you could set up a picnic table. You get it. You know, it's a nice level piece of ground, but not every area is suited for building a wetland area. There's a drainage coming in here, and this drainage carries a lot of water, probably about a 10-acre watershed. Our objectives would be to build an ephemeral wetland that has a wet and dry cycle, and if we put this drainage into it, it's going to hold water all year. Now, take a look down here. See the two fenced areas? Those are trees that we planted. This happens to be our most valuable pasture on the entire farm. And in talking to my wife, we've agreed we don't want to build a wetland here because it's too important to our animals, and we would have to take out our planted trees. And also, there are buried drainage structures here. So if we were to build a wetland here, we'd have all these drainage structures to disable. So let's look for another place that would suit us better and be better suited for building a wetland. I've been walking around our farm looking for a suitable place to build a wetland area, and this looks like it could be the place. It's an area of flat ground. There's a lot of room in between the road and the fence and our other fences. It's a part of the field that we're not using really for any other purpose. It's dominated by Kentucky 31 fescue, and it looks like a shallow basin, a dry shallow basin indicating that it's a drained wetland area. So this looks so promising, it's time to mark the possible center of the wetland we build using 2 wire flags. And this is, when you're on higher ground, this is the time to do it. Pick what you think could be the center of the wetland you're going to build, get down there and mark it, and then we're going to start using the laser to survey it. So this has been Wetland Restoration and Training. I'm Tom Biebighauser. I invite you to visit the website for Wetland Restoration and Training, to subscribe, and to stay tuned for future videos where we'll be talking about how you can design and build a wetland to help the environment. Thank you.